children died because of temptations that were provided on these social media sites. Carl Sabo joins us right now, the NetChoice Vice President, General Counsel, Professor of Internet Law at George Mason University, Scalia Law School. Carl, always good to have you. Where do you think these hearings are going? They're not the first on this parade. They're just the latest.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. This is a huge sideshow. Our kids are suffering from mental health problems. We locked them in their houses for 3 years during COVID. We are constantly telling them the world is going to end because of climate change, but scapegoating social media is not the answer. Mark Zuckerberg is not our kid's dad, and we shouldn't act like he is. So blaming social media for the raising of our children is absurd, and I would not expect Mark Zuckerberg to raise my kids, much in the same way I would not put Captain Crunch in charge of deciding what my kids eat. We are skipping over the responsibility and role of parents, and that's really the unfortunate part of this discussion.
You know what's interesting about it? Senator Klobuchar and Lindsey Graham were on the same page when it came to saying a lot of parents are overwhelmed, particularly those who've lost children or see their children sucked into this universe where getting their attention is next to impossible, and it goes to extremes quite clearly. But these companies are very worried about the prospect of being sued, and they like a world in which that's very hard to do, but that has got to change. What do you make of that?
So, as a parent, I find it incredibly insulting every time I hear that parents are too dumb or too weak to raise our children. Parents have been raising our children since the dawn of man, and I know my kids and my family better than those politicians or Mark Zuckerberg. So we need to tell parents that, guess what, you can do it, and take the phone away. Now, on the litigation liability front, absolutely. Anything that's illegal offline is illegal online. They've talked about child sexual abuse material. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, for example, expressly exempts it. And where we have seen the failure is less than 1% of all instances of child sexual abuse material even result in an investigation. So what we need to do is give law enforcement more tools and more power to actually go out and arrest the abusers rather than blame social media, who's already doing tens of millions of reports that just go unanswered.
Well, you know, it is odd to see the conservatives and the Republicans on the panel among the first to advocate, a big brother playing a role, that is the companies or the government, forcing the companies to have a role in this. And I get what you're saying. But I did find there was far more unanimity when it came to going after TikTok. That CEO, of course, who's always been a pinata every time he appears on the Hill, has to explain that China isn't policing everything he does and all the customers he has. But we know that China does do that, and we know it's written into Chinese corporate law that they have every intention of doing that. So where does that go?
This is one of the challenges that TikTok faces. They're trying to prove a negative. They actually spent over $1.5 billion and actually are siloing all of the U.S. data with Oracle, an American company down in Texas. But they're stuck trying to prove a negative, trying to show that data is not being transferred. However, in the United States, the burden is on the prosecution. And what we need is lawmakers and accusers to actually come forth with the receipts, show the evidence before they start making the accusations.
That's well put, Carl. Very well put. Always good seeing you, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Carl Zabel, this attention on the big tech executives come as big tech investments are getting hammered today. The NASDAQ, when last I looked, was down about 1.5%. It isn't doing any better, and that despite earnings that are looking pretty good for those that have come out. There's just this theory that they're not living up to the whisper number and the hope that things would be even more robust. So Alphabet comes to mind. Advertising revenue off the charts, but there was a hope that they would be even more off the charts. That's not materializing, hitting even issues like Microsoft across the board far better than estimated. Ted Weisberg joins us right now, Seaport Securities founder and president. I do want to expand out to what you think, Ted, about the Fed and its meeting wrapping up today and what it plans. But for tech stocks, everything comes sort of like in threes here. The bashing yesterday that really accelerated after better than expected numbers didn't matter. And now what's going on in Capitol Hill, and now fears that this could morph into something. What do you think?
Well, I mean, anything is possible, Neil. I think most folks would agree that the tech names, especially the 7 or 8 really terrific names that have been carrying the heavy water now going on 14, 15 months, are probably overbought, if not way overbought. So for whatever reasons, probably due for correction. We started to see that last night after the close with some of the tech earnings that got reported after the close, and it continues today. But for the moment, I think it has to be more technical in nature, and when we get reversals or technical reversals in any sector or any group of stocks, it's always sharp, it's always painful, but it does not last forever because it is technical, not fundamental. And my guess is that's probably what we're going through now. Not the end of the world, just a pause that refreshes.
Yeah, you might be right, because those who have sold in prior tech sell-offs have learned to regret it, especially if they were unloading Apple or Microsoft or Alphabet shares, to your point. I am wondering, though, about the Fed. I mean, it has an enormous impact on this industry as well as the entire market. It's not expected to move on rates today, but it could signal, or Jerome Powell could signal, when he might start cutting, or at least quasi-telegraph it. What do you expect?
Well, I think you're 100% correct, Neil. It's all in the rhetoric. So we have to learn to read between the Fed tea leaves, if you will. I suspect the message will be pretty much the same message we've been getting. They'll continue to be data dependent. They'll probably tell us they see signs that inflation is moderating and that they're watching everything very closely. And we'll see where we are at the next meeting. But I would agree with you. I suspect we'll not see any overt moves in terms of interest rates getting reduced as a result of this meeting. You know, one of the problems the market has, and I guess a lot of us have, is that we have a lot of supposed geniuses out there that are predicting what the Fed will or will not do. And unfortunately, wishful thinking is not a good strategy when it comes to the stock market. Clearly, inflation is moderating. On the other hand, the U.S. economy stays strong. So I think, and the inflation numbers appear to be getting better all the time. So we're probably in a good place. It's an election year. I don't know if the Fed is political or not. I suspect it is a little bit. So my guess is we will get some cut in interest rates, but I think it's going to come closer to the early spring, if you will, early summer, as we get closer and closer to the elections in November.
Well, you know, you're the expert, Ted. I just read a prompter, but I could make a case, a compelling case, for the Fed not moving at all this year. That the numbers have been so strong, the rally has been so pronounced, you could push this puppy back to the fall, and by then maybe no cut at all. Because you have good economic news, with inflation coming down, there's no reason to do that just yet. What do you think?
Well, I think, yes. We're in an environment, at least as far as the stock market is concerned, where bad news is good news. In other words, weak economic news is going to be good for the markets because it will reinforce the prospect of the Fed being more aggressive in terms of lowering rates. On the other hand, if we continue to get good news, good economic news, it's basically a negative for the markets because it reinforces the scenario which you just presented, which is quite possible that the economy remains strong, and therefore the ability for the Fed to lower rates would be like throwing gasoline on a fire. So there would be a reluctance to do that. But you know, the big unknown, of course, is once again it's an election year. My guess is that Washington is going to pull every lever they can to put lipstick on a pig, make things look as good as they can for all the obvious reasons, and that includes perhaps twisting the Fed's arm a little bit.
Do you think the Fed doesn't like Donald Trump?
I don't know who the Fed likes or doesn't like.
But if you're
They
talking
claim to
about
be-
stimulus and keeping this puppy going, which I get, and that does
Right.
typically happen in presidential election years, which I know, that would
Right.
benefit Joe Biden. That would not benefit Donald Trump if he were the Republican nominee.
Oh,
And he, of course, a
absolutely,
long
yes.
critic of the Fed, a long one.
That's correct. But
Yeah.
but you know, it's easy for Donald Trump or any of us to sit back and take pot shots at the Fed.
Sure.
The fact is, I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt that they are somewhat not political. But yes, it is true. It's an election year, and I think whatever can be done to keep your boss in office, in this case Biden, probably is a step in the right direction.
That was very judiciously handled, my friend. I admire that. Ted Weisberg on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the best of the best. Don't forget, we've got Henrik Fisker here, a Fisker founder and CEO. He is not giving up on, obviously, electric vehicles. What he sees that a lot of others now sort of poo-pooing the industry do not. So he's my special guest. Also taking a look at Carnival Cruise Line, it is decided that for the better part of $1, we are not going to have cruises in the Red Sea area. Note to self, good idea not to have cruises in the Red Sea area.
Needless to say, you don't have to explain why, with all the turmoil going on. That over there just turned into a freaking nightmare. I'd hate to be a ship carrier right now and knowing that I was having to transport cargo all over the world right now. Piracy. Piracy's been part of the world's climate now for
We just
I guess probably since the days of the Vikings, maybe even a little bit before. That's going way on back there.
don't know much more than that. Rich Edson with more at the Pentagon. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Neil. Well, we all are waiting on that response to see what the United States, what the Pentagon are going to do in reaction to that. On the other side of the world, you're getting word from Iran-backed militias like Hezbollah brigades, along with Kataib Hezbollah. They say that they are no longer going to be targeting, at least very least suspending attacks against U.S. assets in Iraq and in Syria. There have been nearly 170 of these types of attacks across the region since mid-October, at least 4 since the deadly drone strike this weekend, leading the Pentagon to say promises from these Iran-supported militias to de-escalate are coming just too little and too late. Defense officials say they're still investigating which group launched the drone attack that killed 3 U.S. soldiers and whether it came from Iraq or Syria.
The President and the Secretary have both said that we will respond in a time and place of our choosing. I'm, again, not going to go into details of what that could look like, other than the fact that there will be consequences.
3 soldiers killed in the attack, Sergeant Kennedy Sanders and Sergeant Brianna Moffett, both posthumously promoted to sergeant, and Sergeant William Rivers. The White House says President Biden and Defense Secretary Austin will attend the dignified transfer Friday at Dover of the 3 soldiers. 47 U.S. troops have reported injuries from this weekend's attack. 8 were medevaced, 3 to Landstuhl, Germany, where 1 is in critical condition. Attacks from Iranian-backed forces continue in the region. U.S. Central Command say another missile was fired from Yemen from the Houthis towards the Red Sea, and that the destroyer USS Gravely intercepted it. There was no damage reported. Neil?
Thank you for that, Rich, very much. Rich Edson at the Pentagon. Honored to have my next guest, General Rob Spaulding, with us, the U.S. Air Force Brigadier General, Semper CEO, War Without Rules author. He's here in the flesh. I can assure you, has a lower torso, so it's very good to see you. How you doing?
Great. Fantastic.
So what does the president have to do, General? You and I were briefly talking during the break. He says possibly or hinting of something in phases. What do you get from that?
Well, if it's just going to be a strike that goes after the proxies, I don't think it's going to really do anything. I think the president really has to do something different than going after, like the leader, like President Trump went after General Soleimani. I think something that could really change the game and the calculus in terms of the Iranian leaders. A couple things. One, I would sanction Chinese banks that are doing business with Iran. That would put China on notice that they need to get on board. 2, I would go after the uranium enrichment facilities, and then I would let the Iranian leadership know they're next.
The last U.S. president to attempt to go into Iran, and it didn't work out, was Jimmy Carter with the hostage rescue that ended up in some soldiers' deaths. And it's almost as if every U.S. president since has had a hands-off policy going into Iran itself, General. Is that justified?
Well, I think if you're going after something strategic, I think that's something we can do. It does involve risk. All military operations
Going into Iran.
Going into Iran, I think it does have risk, but I think they're acceptable risks that we can. You're not going to get the stopping of the attacks in the region unless you put the Iranian leadership on notice. And if we're not going to do that, then I would recommend getting our soldiers and airmen and sailors out of the region, because my heart goes out to those killed and their families and those that are fighting for their lives right now.
Iran thinks, all right, they're going to maybe expand going after our surrogates around the world, let's say, akin to something Ronald Reagan did in the late 1980s. But when Reagan did it, he wiped out nearly half the Iranian Navy without going into Iran itself. What's the doability, for lack of a better word, of doing something like that?
Well, that's something you could do. My concern, quite frankly, is that they develop a nuclear weapon, and now we've got a completely different Iran to deal with. So I think we need to think about the fact that they have highly enriched uranium right now, and we need to think about possibly taking that out before they become a nuclear power.
Do you think they already have that?
Well, they were already to, I think, 80% enrichment.
Yeah.
Or the last I heard, and that you're close to a weapon right there.
And you think that would be a response that they'd use?
I think that would send them a message. It would also reduce the risk of them developing a nuclear weapon, which I think is a
You'd have to
bigger
go
risk.
to those areas where you think that enrichment is happening. Are
Right,
we
right.
reliably sure of that?
Of where they're at?
Yeah,
Yes.
we are. Okay. General, very good seeing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
General Rob Spaulding, he's the genuine article here. Served his country honorably. In the meantime, the latest on the push to get a cabinet official out. This has not worked since the 1800s. I remember because I covered that one in the 1800s. Didn't go anywhere, but they think they're making progress with one Secretary Mayorkas. We're on that after this.
Covering it all as it happens.
Bitcoin. Well, they're fighting towards who's going to be the chief of the new world order currency, ain't they? That's something that they was talking about, probably going all the way back into the 60s, pertaining to the money issue and the one world government and a new world order and all that. Probably just about the time they assassinated Kennedy. The international military complexes all over the world. Let's listen to this real quick.
You didn't take any
Let's back it up just a tad. Oh, right there.
business invested in you.
Sorry about the electricity going out a while ago. Electricity went off. I was in the process of doing a video and electricity went out.
In you.
Listen up.
So you didn't take any action. You didn't take any action. You didn't fire anybody. You haven't compensated a single victim. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. There's families of victims here today. Have you apologized to the victims? Would you like to do so now? Well, they're here. You're on national television. Would you like now to apologize to the victims who have been harmed by your product? Show them the pictures. Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
Quite an unusual event going just a few minutes ago. Mark Zuckerberg apologizing to parents of young children who were harmed by social media platforms. That includes Instagram, of which he's the parent. This is at this Senate hearing. I believe that is still going on as we speak. A lot of hearings, in fact, going on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, a push right now to kick out the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. Chad Pergram has more on that. Chad.
Neil, good afternoon. Border politics are consuming the Capitol. Impeachment for Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, border talks in the Senate, plus House Speaker Mike Johnson saying it's not up to Congress to seal the border. Now, Johnson right now on the House floor, he is laying down his marker. This is his first maiden floor speech as Speaker. Johnson says he is still relying on rumors about what's in the Senate border bill, but there's still no bill text. Senate negotiator Kirsten Sinema says to expect it, quote, very, very soon, but others think the bill is on ice.
I think a month ago the votes were there. When you have your votes, you take them. You don't keep negotiating and dithering.
So the focus may turn to the House and impeachment for Mayorkas next week, but it's about the math. The GOP only...
You know, it's really sad that we as citizens in America are nothing no more to a lot of these politicians other than statistics. We're just a vote. And to think that that's their primary motive of getting involved in politics is absolutely appallingly sickening. Appallingly sickening that anybody would have nothing more or less than the momentum motive of getting involved with politics, of it just being for the votes and being for money for themselves. But we've seen that again and again and again, and I guarantee you they're going to try to use this individual right here as a scapegoat because of basically what the House has lacked in doing for the past 10 years. And really and truly, we have Donald J. Trump to thank for, because if it wasn't for him putting so much emphasis upon to the southern border pertaining to the illegal immigrants, who's to say that it could still very well be swept under the rug to the degree that nobody's talking about it or discussing it on national TV? It's really sad that it has taken this much effort, this much time, this much energy to do or possibly do the right thing. I don't know that they're ever going to be able to do the right thing whenever it comes to illegal immigrants, because it's too big of a deal to get your arms around. That's the reason why I told them that they should build electrical dams and try to tame the river. I don't know how much property that's going to consume on both sides, but more than likely, if you got a big body of water, odds are you're not going to try to swim across it, especially with a child on your back. Of course, I'm sure there's crazy people out there that would attempt to do it. But ordinarily, that would be the way I think would be able to put not only a wall up, but now you're gaining power, energy that you can sell to the customers and get some sort of a return back on your investment. Just putting up a raw steel wall, good luck in that. They've got portable torches. They've got portable grinders. They've got all kinds of shovels. And whenever it comes to labor, them people don't mind digging deep and long to get to wherever that they want to go. So I really don't think a wall, concrete wall, steel wall, whatever kind of wall, is going to be the answer to the problem. I think they should have started doing like they done the Tennessee River back in the 1920s whenever TVA took it over. And basically Congress gave them a blank check and said, do what you must. And they did, at the expense of many citizens at that time that sacrificed farms, businesses, and even lives, just so we, the people, would have what we got today pertaining to electricity. But it also had a payback, and not just with electricity, but it had a payback as far as recreation, marinas, all kinds of fishing come out of it, plus other wildlife and fowl. Basically created its own ecosystem by doing that. That's where your Corps of Engineers and your people that's involved in those type of affairs should be able to sit down, put a pencil to it, pertaining to the Rio Grande. I don't know how much water flows down the Rio Grande. I don't know if the Rio Grande is even tameable. I know the Mississippi River isn't tameable once you get down probably 500, 600, 700 miles, 1,000 miles past Minnesota. They got some dams up there that creates electricity, hybrid dams. But I don't really think that the Mississippi River could actually be tamed. I think that would be an impossible task. That'd be like trying to drain the ocean. Somebody going to pull the plug on the ocean and drain about 2 feet out of the ocean. Well, good luck in that. Good luck in that. But whenever it's all said and done with, they're trying to put the monkey on this guy's back that he has not been effective in his job, in which possibly they're right. Maybe he hasn't been effective in his job. But the bottom line is this: it don't it don't start at the bottom. It starts at the top. It starts at the House. And it's our politicians that has failed to recognize this way, way before Donald Trump ever come into existence pertaining to the illegal problem coming over the border. So they're probably going to use this guy as an scapegoat. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Now, whether or not they succeed or not, I don't know, but they're putting a lot of pressure on this individual right now to the degree that he'll probably, if he's not already disgusted, he'll probably get so disgusted that he probably regrets that he ever throwed his hat in that arena.
A 2-vote margin. There are 2 or 3 House Republicans who are skeptical of impeachment. Impeachment would automatically trigger a Senate trial for Mayorkas.
This unserious spectacle by House Republicans does nothing to secure our border. There have already been many shameful and embarrassing moments in the Republican House majority, but abusing the Constitution by pursuing the sham impeachment effort is a new ignominious low.
In other words, they're beating the horse at the wrong end. There's no doubt the horse needs beating. But they're beating the horse at the wrong end. It's like a dog trying to chase a bus. Well, what's he going to do after he catches it?
So what are we left with?
Let's go forward here. That stuff like this really irritates me. It breaks my heart to think that this has went on for this length of time before it has really reached a level of being in the limelight, that it took Donald J. Trump to put it in the limelight. And to think that this has been going on now for 10 or more years. Boy, AI, artificial intelligence, has also become a very hot topic pertaining to electrical cars and Twitter and all this other stuff. That's become a very, very hot topic just within the past year. That's a good-looking little boy, wasn't it? Let's keep going. There's Trump. They're talking about Donald again. They talk about Donald just about as much as they talk about themselves. Usually the men talk about the women and the women talk about the men. And both talk about the weather. Like my grandfather used to tell us boys.
We will take it from here. Hello.
That if they're not talking about you, they're letting somebody else rest.
Here. Hello, everyone. I'm Jackie DeAngelis. I'm Taylor Riggs.
And I'm Brian Brenberg. Welcome to the Big Money Show.
The tech-heavy NASDAQ, the S&P
Time
500, they are falling
12
today
o'clock.
after some
It's
disappointing
12
tech
o'clock.
earnings.
Let's see what's going on right here on MSNBC.
Deal and what the U.S. is doing to force the issue. But I want to begin with that contentious hearing on Capitol Hill, demanding answers from the CEOs of the world's biggest social media companies, focusing largely on child sexual exploitation on their platforms. The heads of Facebook and Instagram, Snap, TikTok, Discord, and X, formerly known as Twitter, facing intense pressure from senators on both sides of the aisle.
I just can't believe that the people that we have put in charge of our lives would have sat idly by, because if you really want to put the rubber meet in the road, it's been like less than, I think, 3 years ago, whenever Congress was actually coming up, bringing all these top CEOs up there and thanking them for their inventions, giving them praise at that time. Well, why wasn't they fine-tuning it then? You know why? Because we got people that's in charge of our lives that either could care less or they're unqualified to be in the positions that they're in, because they should have taken notice with all these red flags way before now. And it's, I guess, because of COVID, it's really put it to the forefront pertaining to what AI either has done or shouldn't have done if it was basically gauged or governed properly. Our officials has let this come into our existences without fine-tuning it and making sure that they had all the safeguards in play. So, they're going to use these top CEOs once more as scapegoats. But if the truth be known, the fault lies upon the feet of those who was in control of all this stuff, in control of our lives. We have voted them in power so that they would be a watchdog over us. And look what they have done. And of course, I can use that same analogy over us being $35 trillion in debt, or 36, or however much money that we're in debt. I could go on and on and on pertaining to the illegals, the drugs, the gun violence. It would be endless. It would probably take me at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to even scrape the bottom edges of how much our broken system is broken and how they have failed the safety and the security and the prosperity of the American people. And really and truly, if you really want to get down to the brass tacks of it, whose fault is it? It's actually our fault. It's we the people's fault, because we're the ones that put these people in charge to be the watchman on the wall. And obviously, like I said, they was either unconcerned or they didn't realize the ramifications of what this was going to create. Divorces, bankruptcies, suicides, drug overdoses, people being able to utilize towards gangbusters and everybody getting together online. Hey, let's meet down here at this high-end retail store and we'll go in and swipe out about $1 million or $2 million worth of stuff. They couldn't become organized that way until social media. Now, social media is not just a tool, but it can be a weapon. Somebody should have looked and crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's before that was thrown off into the laps of we the people. So, in actuality, it's our fault. It's our fault that we didn't speak up and we didn't bring this to awareness. And I know probably a lot of those social media platforms out there, probably, I know that they scrutinize me quite closely, to the degree that if I put out something out there that isn't correct, they basically let me know real quick, hey, what you're putting out there is not right. This is incorrect information. So if they're scrutinizing me that way, I'll probably upset somebody in the social media digital platform world, to the degree that they're going to make sure that I walk the line, because I'm the one telling them that they should be walking the line. Well, now it's spread to the point when it becomes a safety concerns, that now the people that we've hired to be in charge of our lives is now starting to give the appearances towards being able to govern these situations, in which, if I'm not mistaken, Zuckerberg, all those main CEOs, they have told Congress before now that it needed to be governed, and that they have created something basically that is basically uncontrollable. It's out of control. A matter of fact, Elon Musk and one or two other ones has said that it could very well be the end of civilization as we know it. And it could. And I'm just not talking about the mark of the beast pertaining to the New World Order. I'm talking about destroying human beings' lives. that now is being used not as a tool, but as a weapon. Please listen.
When a Boeing plane lost a door in mid-flight several weeks ago, nobody questioned the decision to ground a fleet of over 700 planes. So why aren't we taking the same type of decisive action on the danger of these platforms when we know these kids are dying?
So here you are. If you're waiting on these guys to solve the problem, we're going to die waiting.
Well, the numbers are staggering. A Washington Post analysis of child sexual abuse material on these platforms shows, quote, Meta reported by far the largest number of files on its platforms in 2022, the most recent year for which company-specific data is available. They had more than 21 million reports on Facebook alone. Google reported 2.2 million, Snapchat 550,000.
21 million on Facebook? Am I reading that right? That right there, that's a lot of people. 21 million people. That's like all the East Coast of America. That right there would cover over about 10, 15 states. Unbelievable. Snapchat, TikTok, and even our president has said that TikTok needed to be eliminated from the American institution base because TikTok is run by some other entity other than the American entity. So there's no doubt people like TikTok and other people out there, we can't control them because they live in another country. And now this stuff is now went airborne, kind of like a virus or a pandemic. It's went airborne, and now don't nobody know how to control it. Don't nobody know how to govern it because it's too much. They're starting to govern it. Like I said, they monitor me quite closely. Of course, I knew that they was going to monitor me before I ever got on social media, because of my background of some of the stuff that I've been involved in. And that's one reason why that I wanted to get on social media, so that I could explain my story or my case to various people, that maybe they would intensely understand what my motives was towards ever going out west to begin with. Whenever the ordeal happened with the 51 days standoff in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas. I was working for Jerry Smith's Body Shop at the time in Milan, Tennessee. And I couldn't tell you the unprofessionalism, anti-social events that was happening to me during that time, either right before or after. And I know this is probably going to sound strange to some people, but my wife at the time had a daughter, which would be my stepdaughter, and she was basically going through puberty stage. And there was all kinds of enticing events that was happening that I really had to put my foot down and say, you know what, this isn't going to happen here. Also, my wife was being hounded by her ex-husband towards wanting to take the daughter away from her, not because of anything that either she or I had done physically to Amanda. I'm going to go ahead and put her name out there, Amanda. Not anything that we had done to her directly, but indirectly, her dad that lives over by Possum Trot down by Hornbeak was trying to prove a case that because of my social religious background, and because the way that the general public had basically rebelled against it. I mean, it's one thing to say, you know what, we ain't going to listen to this guy. We don't want to have nothing to do with this religion. But he knew that I was being attacked because I was being shunned. I was being driven out of churches. I was being talked about. I was being hated because of the information that I was putting out there to the general public, even though it was coming out of the same Bible that they claimed that they believed in, the King James, because this is the Bible Belt area. Not only was we being attacked towards her ex-husband, trying to take Amanda away from us strictly because of psychological damages that could be done to the child because of my background. Yeah, that really went on. I mean, that was a legal court case that you're more than welcome to look up pertaining to my ex-wife. Today, that was having to fight for her own daughter during the time that the public was persecuting me over. There was also another incident that happened with me and my wife. We was both sleeping in the bed, and something jolted us to the degree that it was like a red flash happened. She seen it and I did too, to the point that it woke both of us up. It alerted us. And God showed me what that was later on. That was a demon that was actually entering into my domain that was trying to overtake or possibly kill me. And because of it, that demon is now in hell. I don't know what demon it was. May have been more than one demon, but I'm telling you, God is a protector of his children. And if you have an anointing in your life, God will protect you, even if these demonic spirits are coming at you, in which, my God, I've had so many of them coming at me, I can't even begin to start to mention all the events that's happened in my life during the span of the life of the Windmill Ministries missions, beginning back in basically 1983, whenever I made a telephone call to the White House that I was going to be the one to meet the Antichrist. I couldn't tell you the spiritual pressures that has been put, spiritual pressures that turned into basically social pressures, mental pressures, physical pressures that I had to deal with again and again and again, that led basically to a divorce, and then we remarried again. And once more, I was basically called down, put on a red carpet, basically, by telling me, after an event happened in a Pentecostal Lighthouse, First Pentecostal Church in Jackson, Tennessee, whenever I stood up to give my testimony, and I was told that my testimony was a lie. My wife basically set me down and told me how the cow was going to eat the cabbage, that if I ever stood back up for that ministry, for what I believed in, that she was going to be long gone. In other words, she was blackmailing me at that time. She was telling me how the cow was going to eat the cabbage, and that this event that you was in, Mr. Jackson, she no longer wanted a part of it. She cared about you, but she no longer cared about the endeavors that she originally, I thought, was a loyal follower of, because she never would have married me in the middle of a highway on Highway 89 in between Cydonia, Tennessee and Sharon, Tennessee, stopping the traffic on both sides of the road and basically performing an illegal marriage on the road without a permit to be able to stop the traffic that way. At the time, I didn't think it through towards whether or not it was going to be an illegal event or a legal event. I just knew that she cared about me. She cared about the endeavors that I was involved in, or she gave that impression that she did. And we got married on the road. People in the South like to talk about other people, and I guess it's probably that way out west, it's probably that way up north and out east. But a lot of this stuff has been created by people's own imaginations in what that they have said, how that they have said it, and how long and how far that the fish tail actually become a tail. In other words, you started out with a fish that was only about 2 pounds, and then it goes to another person, and the fish story goes to that person. Well, it's a 4-pound fish. And then it goes to the next person. Well, it's an 8-pound fish. And it goes to the next person. No, it's a 20-pound fish. We seen it. It was a 20-pound fish. It was this long. And tales like that has a tendency to be not only exploited but exaggerated upon, and that was one of the main barriers that I run into whenever I come back here in 2014 towards basically all hell, literal hell, busting loose in not only my life but my brother's life, that basically costed my younger brother his life because he couldn't handle the pressures that the public was portraying upon to me. And they was willing to take him down to get to me. And that's exactly what they done. They took my younger brother down simply because of anti-Semitism right here in Northwest Tennessee in the Bible Belt area that the Weakley County courts, as far as I'm concerned, allowed to happen. Allowed to happen. That should be charged for dereliction of duty, and their positions that they're in should be immediately taken away from them and put other people in their positions that can run the show a whole lot better than they have. And I don't have to sit here and mention a bunch of names pertaining to the people that was engaged in all this, going from 2014 to 2017, and then after my brother died, then they was going to make the main kill on me, I guess, towards actually coming at me because we had hired an attorney that was, I guess, careless, or I don't know, he may have been on drugs. He may have been not worth a dime. I don't know. Anyways, we both put in money to hire this guy to represent us in court. And because he didn't let me know the court date, then the tables turned. Now all of a sudden, now I'm in jeopardy because I didn't make the court date, even though it was my attorney that didn't make sure the responsibility of me knowing the court date. Even after I was arrested for this and placed in front of Judge Pence in Dresden, Tennessee, my attorney that we hired said to him, "Your Honor, it is my fault. I did not let Mr. Jackson, it was an oversight on my part. I did not let him know when his court date was." So to me, it was a frame-up job. It was a setup job. Regardless whether it was consciously done or unconsciously done, that's what occurred. That turned the tables within a 10-day period after my brother had died in 2017. And basically at that point in time, I was helpless. I was helpless. If people want to know what drove me to a state of suicide, towards me basically trying to hang myself from a bunk bed in my prison cell with my sheet, now you know. It's because of the unprofessionalism that was being done, not only then, in 2017, 10 days after my brother had died, but all throughout the span of basically the life of the Windmill Ministries here in Northwest Tennessee, been progged, been agitated, been threatened, been punished, been kicked out of churches over, been thrown in jails and mental institutions over. I could go on and on and on and on pertaining to the persecution of the individual that's speaking to you right now and behind the camera of all this. Let's listen to some more of this.
And Discord 170,000. X reported under 100,000. During testimony, families of the victims of social media dressed in black held up images of those laws they say are tied to social media. And here's what happened after Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg apologized for what their families have had to go through.
This is why we invested so much and are going to continue doing these streaming efforts to make sure that no one has to go through the types of things that your families have had to suffer.
NBC's Sahil Kapoor reports from Capitol Hill. Adam Connor, the Vice President of Technology.
I'm going to ask a question. This is a hypothetical question. Please bear with me as I'm trying to get somewhere with this question. If our lawmakers and our law enforcement people decided out of the blue that they was going to pass a law that any child at the age of 12 could get in behind a wheel if they could pass the written examination and start driving automobiles, would that not be a violation upon their parts pertaining to the people that we have hired to protect us and take care of us? Would that not be a violation upon their parts if they was to make it legal for a 12-year-old child to basically be able to operate an automobile just like a grown-up? Sure it would. Sure it would. There would be absolutely no question in hand that that movement was a gross, negligent, and possibly even an intentional, deliberate malice act to take out vengeance upon to the very people that you're supposed to be protecting and taking care of. So if we're smart enough to identify various policies and laws like that, how come the majority of us wasn't smart enough to see these red flags coming down the road pertaining to all these social media platforms that, like I said, it really become a boiling point during COVID, because COVID at that time basically stalemated everybody, and a lot of people was hidden in their little four walls trying to not get the COVID during the time that the government was passing out stimulus checks to everybody, or most everybody. I think a lot of that money went to people that shouldn't have never went to. That's another subject matter. But how come it has taken this long before the wisest of the wise, the educated of the educated, those that claim that they care about us, have sat idly by and let this get out of hand this way, to the degree that it's just now getting in the limelight like it should? How come? Got to be two reasons. Either the people that we got up there are unqualified to know the dangers and to see the dangers coming towards being the watchman on the wall, or they just don't care. Either or. It's dereliction of duty, and as far as I'm concerned, every stinking politician, either on a federal level, state level, or a local level, needs to be reprimanded because of. Every one of them. Especially those that has been in power for the past, I'm going to say, 3 to 5 years. Anybody that's been in power for the past 3 to 5 years, they need to be heavily reprimanded and possibly even lose their positions of their authority that they're in. Regardless whether they be a judge, a senator, a congressman, or a local sheriff down the road. Because they have allowed this. But most importantly, we the people have allowed it because we didn't wake up to the facts. Like we should have.
American Progress, who has spent the last 15 years working at the intersection of technology, politics, policy, and elections. Also with us here, Ryan Heath, global tech correspondent for Axios. So Adam, we're hearing politicians push those CEOs on their into legislation, taking responsibility over and over again, but not much in the way of commitment. What can and should a hearing like this accomplish, do you think?
Well, in many ways, this is a mirror repeat of a hearing we've seen over and over again. Tech CEOs dragged before Congress to kind of answer for a variety of issues within this case, child safety framework. I think what's really different about this hearing compared to others is what you showed in that preview. You know, the families of victims who've been really tangibly impacted by this. I think a bipartisan concern for children and teenagers about the effects of this. And I think that gives this hearing and this topic more salience than some of the other tech hearings we've seen. But it ends up running into the same problems we've seen within Congress and regulating the tech industry, which is breakdowns in the kind of partisan process and disagreements about which topic to tackle first. And I think even within this hearing, you saw certain senators focusing on really important and critical issues like CSAM and others wanting to take the conversations in different directions, like the impact of China on TikTok, other things. And so it's always difficult to have a conversation here. I think what is really different about this hearing and really important is the topic, but also the kind of voices of the victims and their families.
And Sahil, Senator Dick Durbin said this is, in fact, the biggest audience he has ever seen in the committee room, and he has 22 years on the panel, so there are a lot of eyes on this. Networks taking it as well. What's the latest at this hour? What are we seeing?
That's right, Chris. Well, the hearing is still going. These tech CEOs certainly face a chilly reception in that room. I caught up with Senator Dick Durbin just a few moments ago when he walked out during a break. He said it's one of the most overwhelming hearings he's ever participated in, and he's served in the Senate for decades. He noted that the room was packed with families showing pictures of children who have been exploited. There were several confrontational moments in that hearing, as we've become accustomed to seeing between senators and the tech CEOs. I want to play one of them between Senator Josh Hawley and Mark Zuckerberg.
Wait a minute, your own study says that you make life worse for 1 in 3 teenage girls. You increase anxiety and depression. That's what it says, and you're here testifying to us in public that there's no link. You've been doing this for years. For years, you've been coming in public and testifying under oath that there's absolutely no link. Your product is wonderful. The science is nascent, full speed ahead, while internally, you know full well your product is a disaster for teenagers.
Senator,
and yet you keep right on doing what you're doing. Right?
That's not true.
Now, those two could quibble over the details, but the link between Meta's platforms, most notably Instagram, and negative mental health impacts for teen girls has been well established. The bigger question here is Congress going to act, or is this going to be another situation where they bring in tech CEOs, create these viral moments, and then they go back, they go back home and ultimately do nothing? There are several major pieces of legislation that are on the table that Congress is considering. Let's put up the graphic that shows that. There's the Kids Online Safety Act, which would create liability for recommending or promoting content detrimental to minors. The Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, which sets up standards for transparency and disclosure. The SHIELD Act, which would criminalize sending non-consensual images online. The Stop CSAM Act, that stands for Child Sexual Abuse Material. The Earn It Act stands for Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect. And the Project Safe Childhood Act, which would bolster prosecution of child exploitation crimes. I spoke also a few moments ago to Senator Richard Blumenthal, who is a sponsor of one of those bills, the Kids Online Safety Act. He said what's clear is that there's a lack of trust here, that they cannot trust these tech CEOs to police themselves, to create a safe environment for children, that Congress must act. He's very hopeful that his bill will pass. But again, Chris, there's no guarantee of which, if any of these bills, is going to come to the floor. That's going to be a question for Senate leadership, most notably Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, and what can get through the House.
So, Ryan, absolutely, Adam is right. We've heard this story before. It was very moving to see the family members who are in the audience holding up the pictures of their children who have died as a result of this. 3, by the way, of these CEOs have never come before Congress before then. They had to be subpoenaed. They did not come here happily, or I don't want to say willingly, but it doesn't seem happily. What have you heard thus far? What keeps sticking in my brain, and Adam pointed out that it's much more complex than this, but is a lot of these senators don't really understand how any of this works.
They've gotten better.
And so have the CEOs arriving. Zuckerberg's been through this loop before, so I'm not sure if it was spontaneous or staged, but to turn around and give that apology, that was giving the stakeholders something that the CEOs didn't used to give in these hearings. And that's been enough to keep regulation at bay until this point. But I think what we're really seeing now is that the business model is the heart of these problems.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second because Senator LaFonza Butler is asking each CEO, have you met with parents of these children? Let's listen.
Consumers.
Yes, over the years I've had a lot of conversations with parents.
You know, that's interesting, Mr. Zuckerberg, because we talked about this last night and you gave me a very different answer. I asked you this very question.
Well, I told you that I didn't know what specific processes our company had.
No, Mr.
for
Zuckerberg,
answering.
you said to me that you had not.
I must have misspoke.
I want to give you the room to misspeak, Mr. Zuckerberg, but I asked you this very question. I asked all of you this question, and you told me a very different answer when we spoke. But I won't belabor it. Can I, a number of you have talked about X, Ms. Yaccarino, have you talked to parents directly, young people, but about designing your product?
As a new leader of X, the answer is yes. I've spoken to them about the behavioral patterns because less than 1% of our users are in that age group, but yes, I have spoken to them.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Spiegel, there are a number of parents whose children have been able to access illegal drugs on your platform. What do you say to those parents?
Well, Senator, we are devastated that we cannot...
To the parents, what do you say to those parents, Mr. Spiegel?
I'm so sorry that we have not been able to prevent these tragedies. We work very hard to block all search terms related to drugs from our platform. We proactively look for and detect drug-related content. We remove it from our platform, preserve it as evidence, and then we refer it to law enforcement for action. We've worked together with nonprofits and with families on education campaigns because the scale of the fentanyl epidemic is extraordinary. Over 100,000 people lost their lives last year, and we believe people need to know that one pill can kill. That campaign reached was viewed more than 260 million times on Snapchat. We also
Mr. Spiegel, there are two fathers in this room who lost their sons. They're 16 years old. Their children were able to get those pills from Snapchat. I know that there are statistics and I know that there are good efforts. None of those efforts are keeping our kids from getting access to those drugs on your platform. As a California company, all of you, I've talked with you about what it means to be a good neighbor and what California families and American families should be expecting from you. You owe them more than just a set of statistics. And I look forward to you showing up on all pieces of this legislation, all of you, showing up on all pieces of legislation to keep our children safe. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to come back to you. I talked with you about being a parent to a young child who doesn't have a phone, is not on social media at all. And one of the things that I am deeply concerned with as a parent to a young Black girl is the utilization of filters on your platform that would suggest to young girls utilizing your platform the evidence that they are not good enough as they are. I want to ask more specifically and refer to some unredacted court documents that reveal that your own researchers concluded that these face filters that mimic plastic surgery negatively impact youth mental health indeed and well-being. Why should we believe that because that you're going to do more to protect young women and young girls when it is that you give them the tools to affirm the self-hate that is spewed across your platforms? Why is it that we should believe that you are committed to doing anything more to keep our children safe?
Sorry, there's a lot to unpack there.
There
We
is
give
a lot.
people tools to express themselves in different ways, and people use face filters and different tools to make media and photos and videos that are fun or interesting across a lot of the different products that are
Plastic surgery pens are good tools to express creativity.
Senator, I'm not speaking to
Skin
that.
lightening tools are tools to express creativity. This is the direct thing that I'm asking
I'm
about.
not defending any specific one of those. I think that the ability to kind of filter and edit images is generally a useful tool for expression. For that specifically, I'm not familiar with the.
You know, I'm going to weigh in on this. You know, if these platforms are so quick about identifying privacy rights, in other words, if there's some music going in the background, and unless it's open content, let's say like standards out of the Bible or standards out of most American songbooks, they'll red flag you on that. And if you get enough red flags, you'll basically go to social media jail. They'll take you plumb off. If they could had scrutinized people in identifying that because of major lawsuits, how come that they didn't identify these other red flags that they should have been observing and looking at too as well? And I didn't realize how unfair and how cruel and mean that a lot of men are to women that they're either dating or married to, that some of those men are so overbearing and demanding that if their significant other even so much as gains a half a pound or a pound, they get ridiculed to death over it. They literally cause that young lady's life misery because now she has gained an extra pound or two, and because of it, they're not going to have it. They're not going to have it. I didn't realize how cruel that society has become until whenever I went out west, and I got a niece out there, her name is Julie, and she got to explaining to me the problems that was involved in her marriage, and she was also working in a weight facility at the time down in Southern California, and was also dealing with stolen merchandise towards going over the state line into Mexico and getting a bunch of pills to make you swell up and bulk up and make you lose weight and basically make fine tune you and make you look like something that was basically outlawed here in America for whatever reason. I'm not into that area of rules and regulations on all that, so I really don't know the details about it. I just know that she worked in a weight room facility and done these drugs primarily to satisfy him. Primarily to satisfy him. It wasn't that they had some sort of a franchise going, an illegal franchise. She was going over there to take care of herself because she knew that if she so much as gained a half a pound, she was going to get it. She was going to get a tongue lashing. And then anything beyond that was probably either threats or actual physical abuse. And I wouldn't have never dreamed in 1,000 million years that young girls in America are put under that type of strenuous abuse. Now, since all these social media platforms has come into play, it has basically created a false sense of what beauty is supposed to be. And if you're not built like a brick house, it's degrading to these women. It's degrading to these girls. And a lot of them actually start starving themselves to death. Kind of like, and I forgot her name now, they was brothers and sisters that played in, orchestrated the Carpenters band that basically starved herself to death because she didn't look appropriate with her body. All social media has done is take problems that I didn't even recognize as little as it was like 2012 whenever I was out there in California, that I didn't even recognize existed, that now has enhanced them and made the problems even that much more severe and greater. Not counting all the other stuff that this social media has done towards spying on people and being untrustworthy, causing divorces, causing separations, even business partners, has lost the sensibility of trusting each other because they get online and they can see where, well, he's over here doing this or she's over here doing that. And because of it, that makes me wonder if they're truly loyal of being a business partner. There is so many gaps, so many red flags that should have been looked at. And the only flag that I can tell that was looked at was lawsuits pertaining to privacy rights. Because I guarantee you, if you're playing something in the background and it's not your own personal music and they can identify it, they'll red flag you. They'll red flag you. So if they can do that, how come they hadn't been working on all these other entities? They didn't want to. They was feeding us stuff that the American people was eating up, the majority of them, and because the ratings was high, they kept feeding it to us. And the people that we had put in these positions, basically in control of our lives, sat idly by and let it occur. Now, today, 2024, either the end of January or the beginning of February, I don't keep up with my dates like I ought to, the genie has been let out of the bottle. The genie's been let out of the bottle. The toothpaste has been pushed out of the tube, and now they're having difficulty putting it back in. You know why? Because you give somebody an inch, they're going to take a mile. And now we have a sick society out there that if you was to jerk out all the social media content that's available right now, even with children, they would feel like that you was pulling a biscuit out of their mouths. That they're entitled to that because they're paying X amount of dollars for their usages. I have never in my entire life ever thought that the Christian society would have been so blinded that they would have let something like this come on board, of it being nothing more than a tool that can be weaponized by the devil, Lucifer, Satan himself. You talk about letting your guards down and basically letting the fox into the chicken coop. That's what our church sector over here in America has done. Now, I don't know how stringent that they are in other countries. I haven't heard how stringent that other countries are. But I'm telling you right now, it has created an entity in people's lives that 10 years ago did not exist. 5 years ago did not exist. Even 3 years ago, pre-COVID, really did not exist. And it's taken this much strenuous damage in people's lives, regardless whether it was children or grown-ups, businesses or whatever. It has taken this much pressure to put these people on the red carpet of saying why. Why? You're supposed to be the professionals. You was supposed to be the one to examine all this stuff before you ever throwed it out there to the general public. And now the public is reaping the consequences on account of it. If my dad and mom, and especially their dad and mom, was still living, I really have a tendency of believing that they would be able to accept all this towards it being normal. I mean, we went to an abnormal state probably 30 years ago. And I know this is going to sound funny and possibly even quirky to people pertaining to artificial intelligence. But whenever you call a business and it asks you electronically, animated with some sort of a voice, press 1 for English and 2 for Spanish, that right there was a door opening for all this digital data, artificial intelligence now that is invading our lives. As a matter of fact, you can go back further than that, back whenever they created Donkey Kong and Pac-Man and all that other stuff, that these was all areas that they was touching off on towards basically artificial intelligence that was going to be dictating and dominating and destroying people's lives. Maybe I ought not feel the way that I feel about artificial intelligence because I actually did pray that the Dragon that originally was on, I think it was on Windows something. I don't forget now what program it was on. I think the Dragon really come out pretty flamboyant right before the year 2000, before Y2K happened. And of course, after Y2K happened, whenever it forced everybody to upgrade to a newer system, then it was predominant towards having home computers to where if you had bad spelling, your English wasn't good, you could just get on the Dragon, and I think there was 3 or 4 other ones at the time that you could get on that would basically be speak and spell. In other words, you just talk into it and it would type it out just like if you was the one doing the typing. Well, they have altered that to the degree that now, instead of it being on landline, now it's digital. It's going up and down through the airwaves. And they have modernized it to the degree that now all you basically got to do is start talking into your phone. And not only does it know what you're asking, not only does it know what you're telling, but you can use it as a typist. You can look up encyclopedia words. You can look up dictionary words all over the world. Now, some of those things are probably assets to society. Some of them are. Especially whenever it comes to somebody now having to travel all the way down to the library over here somewhere and spend a half a day looking up something. Some of that stuff is actually good whenever it comes to businesses being able to formulate and utilize their services like UPS, FedEx. I'm pretty sure that Walmart, as big as they are, probably couldn't operate near as efficiently as they operate today if it wasn't for artificial intelligence. That began 25, 30 years ago with the internet. So we've seen it grow. We've seen it escalate. We've seen it basically turn into what it is today. But now, and it's taken all this long before people can wake up, even though they come out with the movie Terminator. When did the movie Terminator come out? In the 80s? We've known that this was coming down the pike. I mean, there was even talk about it years ago towards, well, what are we going to do whenever the insurance companies can identify whether or not you're a low risk and a high risk, and they're going to charge you X amount of dollars for life insurance to where they're going to charge this one twice as much. Called privacy rights. Things are out of control. We have allowed for something to come into our lives that instead of it being an asset, is turned into an enemy. And I've said this again and again and again by using this as an example of going back to the Trojan horse that I think it was Troy, that received a gift from their enemies of a big horse that 2 or 3 of them had a bad feeling about it and said, no, we don't want to accept that as a gift. No, we ain't going to accept that. But the other 3 or 4 overrid their decision towards, yeah, we're going to bring that into our domain. So they opened up the barriers, they brought the horse in, and nobody was willing to check the horse and see what was inside of it. And later that night, there was about 50 men inside of it with all kinds of weaponry that basically went into their camp and butchered them. That's why it's called the Trojan horse. There's also another example of the Achilles heel, that we have brought something into our existences that look like something that looked more favorable than toilet paper. I like to use that example, toilet paper. Because I can remember a time whenever you didn't use toilet paper. I can go all the way back whenever you actually used corn cobs. There would be a whole bushel basket of shucked corn cobs, raw corn cobs, beside the crapper, and that's basically what you used to wipe your tail with, because at that time, toilet paper was kind of scarce. And this was in the 60s in the South. Probably you can go back to the existence of toilet paper all the way back probably to the 20s or 30s. I don't know, whenever toilet paper come about. But I'm just saying, they used Sears and Roebuck catalogs to be able to wipe their tails with. How come it has taken this long for people to do a turnaround of understanding the dangers involving in all these social media platforms? It's got to be one or two things. Either they didn't care, or they was incapable of understanding the psychological, emotional, physical damages that was going to go along with the package. Just like the Trojan horse. I rest my case.
Study that you're referring to, but we did make it so that we're not recommending this type of content to teens.
I made no reference to a study, to court documents that revealed your knowledge of the impact of these types of filters on young people generally, young girls in particular.
Senator, I disagree with that characterization. I think that there's been
court documents.
I haven't seen any document.
Okay, Mr.
She's got facts. I'm going to go as far as say this. Even our standard court systems cannot protect us from spam calls that can actually overwhelm somebody, and you got to pay extra filtering systems that even the telephone services can't prevent. They can't prevent a lot of hackers. They can't prevent a lot of bad characters. And the fact that we're fixing to walk off into a presidential election this year, that these things hadn't been modified, that could cause that much more chaos. Do you realize that artificial intelligence could basically frighten a country to the degree of opening up arms on another country pertaining to nuclear warfare if it wasn't covered and self-safed in different areas? I mean, they're already talking about the futuristic stuff that's going to come into the future. Well, my God, we can't even deal with what's going on right now, much less the stuff that's coming down the pike. I mean, whenever you have actual robots that not only talk, but can actually walk, and you can't tell them the difference between a real person versus an android, and you're unleashing this stuff out into society without it having no barriers or no kind of guardrails as far as governing it, whoa, you're asking for problems. You're asking for probably the destruction of humanity. That's the reason why so many people my age and a little older was so fearful even of grabbing a hold of the flip phone. It took them like 10 years to finally edge off into the fact, well, let's get the flip phone. Well, flip phone basically has part of that same technology in it because it's got a chip to make it operate. It's got a chip, and Google can follow you all around. It don't matter if you're looking up dog food or you're involved in hunting or sports or whatever. They'll follow you around, and next thing you know, you'll be bombarded by all these commercials that's related around dog food. Or all these commercials is related around hunting. We're being played. We are being preyed upon with this entity that has been released out into society that is just now taken good, sound, strong people of realizing the damages that goes along with it.
Mr. Zuckerberg, my time is up. I hope that you hear what is being offered to you and are prepared to step up and do better. I know this Senate committee is going to do our work to hold you to greater account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So let me go back to you, Ryan. That's tough stuff. I mean, it is very, very difficult to be asked a direct question and asked to directly address the parents of kids who have died, to hear someone spout statistics. And maybe that's the decision that they made when they prepared for this hearing. Maybe saying, we're not recommending that they use these filters seems like an answer. I think that
not the answer a parent of a teenager would give.
Not at all, no. Right? So
you got to face the facts in society today that wasn't even in existence back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We got literal children having children and children raising other children. We've got stuff going on today that did not exist 30, 40, 50 years ago. So now it's opened up and let us be vulnerable to this. While in the meantime, profiteers has gotten stinking, filthy, you-know-what rich off of preying on the emotions and the handicaps of a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people that was either narrow-minded or weak-minded, or they themselves was entertained or pleasurized by this type of intelligence.
There's a toughness to the questioning. There's a difficulty with the answers, but
because I promise you, whenever I prayed for the dragon to come online pertaining to seeing the flip phone, that God, you're going to have to make this available before I'm ever going to truly be able to get my message out before the world. I guarantee you, I didn't pray for it to destroy people's lives. I didn't pray that the dragon that was going to be run by the engine of Google and Sierra and all these other different platforms out there, I didn't pray that this entity was going to destroy humanity. I just needed something to get out there so I could tell my story, because obviously wasn't nobody else interested in my story. Not around here. They may be in other parts of the country. They may be out west. They may be in up north. I don't know. But as of right now, I don't see no interest in the testimony of the founder of the Windmill Ministries Missions. It's been now out in the public eye since 1989. Actually, it became in the public eye in 1988, because anytime you send something to the White House, that's supposed to be documented and noted, and I'm sure it is in the Reagan Library. You'd have to go to Thousand Oaks to find it, and God only knows how much paperwork, or probably go through microchips or whatever to be able to find it, but you'd probably find it. Yeah, Reagan received this material coming from Route 1, Sharon, Tennessee. And I know that they received it because they sent it back to me, number one. And number two, probably less than 90 days later, I was introduced to the Masons at that time that set up in Sharon, Tennessee in a Cadillac running while I was being questioned about my beliefs, who I was, what I was, and all the above. That was in 1989. I could tell you a completely different story towards what happened to me in 1983 whenever I made a telephone call to the White House. So all this stuff that's been going on in my life is really real. It's not a figment of my imagination, just like all this stuff going on right now in people's lives is really real. Now, you can deny it all you want to and say, well, this ain't going to be no problem. We can control this. Oh, really? Can you? You can't even control a firearm without mass shootings popping up everywhere in America. It would be the same difference if our lawmakers said, you know what, we're going to make it legal for a 10 or 12-year-old child, as long as they could pass the written test, that they can drive any automobile that they want to, including a high-speed Corvette or a Aston Martin or a race car. As long as they can pass the test, we're going to put them out there on the road. Do you realize how chaotic that would be? Think about that for a second. You got children right now growing up that can't stay focused for 5 seconds on something, much less put them in behind a wheel. It's bad enough in the agriculture communities pertaining to putting children in behind $1 million combines running down Reelfoot Avenue in the middle of Union City, not knowing if they're going to run over somebody and crush them like a bug. Because I guarantee you, those big combines, if they ever was to run over an automobile, it probably wouldn't be nothing left but just a crumbled up piece of metal. They're huge. They're dangerous. They can cause damage. Whenever I was growing up in the farming community, I was probably driving a 2-ton flatbed truck and tractors at the age of 10. At the age of 10. I really never did have a childhood, because as soon as I got old enough to pull the load, I guarantee you, my dad, the way that he was, hooked it up. Now, I did have a little bit of private life pertaining to me growing up. I did get to watch Gilligan's Island, and I did get to watch the Dukes of Hazzard. I did get to watch all the cartoon shows that come on, Bugs Bunny and Road Runner and Popeye and the Sailor Man and the things that come on pertaining to other programs. In other words, I wasn't completely isolated away from the world. But by and large, my childhood was very, 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 very short. The vast majority of my childhood was up north. Whenever we come down Tennessee in 1966, basically whenever I turned 7 years old, that's whenever I started hauling buckets of water and feeding hogs and breaking ice in the wintertime, and in the summertime mowing yards, either by a push mower or a riding mower. By the age of 10, I was driving 2-ton trucks and tractors out in the field. And in some cases, even on the roads, getting the tractor or the truck from point A to point B. Because that was the common way of doing things back then. Especially in the agriculture community.
Back to the original point, what is going to change an industry that is worth billions of dollars, and let's not kid ourselves, that kids all across America are addicted to?
There's only two things. One is actual regulatory action through Congress, and we see that patchwork of bills that appeared on screen a few minutes ago. There has to be some consolidation of those bills, and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell have to decide that this is important enough to get this beyond the committee stage. And second, there's actions that the companies can take themselves, possibly tied back to threats to their earnings and the investor confidence levels that they have by connecting the finances with the social impacts that we've been hearing today. but they have to be willing to consider elements of their business model. The business model is let as many people as possible communicate as easily as possible, and then triage the problems, however dramatic or even deadly, like we've seen today, triage the problems later. And until someone forces more friction up front into the system, we're just going to see repeats of this problem. Either you have...
I'm gonna say this. This has actually destroyed industries here in America. Some of them need to be destroyed, like Hugh Hefner, Playboy. Well, why do you want to go out and get a Playboy book now when all you got to do is you to it and say, give me this and give me that, and there it is, live. It's literally destroyed industries, and Hollywood has been another one that's taken a lick, and there's been all other kinds of different types of industries out there that has taken licks like this. I'm just wondering if the people that was creating this monster knowed what they was creating. If they realized what that they was actually doing. And I'm talking about the CEOs.
You have to do age verification. You have to have delays in content that is uploaded so that you have ways to catch this material before it spreads. Or you have to make sure that minors are not able to get onto the platform and experience or share this sort of material. That costs money, it takes time, it's against the business model. And that's the...
And the only way to do that and do it accurately is that every phone that every person has would have to be identified with that person either by face, voice, or finger recognition. And the odds of changing the industry around like that is probably slim to none. That would be like changing the gun industry and making every gun digitalized to the point that whoever had the gun, that bought the gun, that should have the gun, if it gets in the hands of somebody else, the gun won't fire. Well, I guarantee you there's people out there that can modify that gun to the point that, hey, they'd cut a wire or do something to it to make the gun still go off. We got so many different bad actors out there that's doing so much stuff right now, bad, cruel, that it's a nightmarish type scenario that's going on right now in the year 2024 pertaining to artificial intelligence. And I used the scenario towards the Trojan horse. They thought it was a gift. They thought it was a good thing. Bring it on board. Bring it into camp. Until later that night.
As was pointed out in this hearing, the money that is being spent on safety is a tiny percentage of the money that these companies are bringing in every single year. Adam, we hear so much, again, of this conversation from the tech CEOs. It's about what parents can control. But as Senator Amy Klobuchar pointed out, they're not always the best experts on this stuff. Take a listen.
Because it's new. It's new.
Just to be clear, I remember one mom telling me, with all these things she could maybe do that she can't figure out, it's like a faucet overflowing in a sink, and she's out there with a mop while her kids are getting addicted to more and more different apps and being exposed to material. We've got to make this simpler for parents so they can protect their kids.
She argues that this needs to be on the company because they know their apps inside and out rather than the parents. Is that fair? And can it be done? Do they know how to do it, but it might not be a good business model?
That's a great question. I think there's two parts to it. I think Senator Klobuchar's example was really illustrative there. Absolutely, the onus has been shifted entirely on parents right now, and that is just unacceptable for the things that we've talked about, right? The complication, the fact that a child has, control of their own device and maybe a sophistication that their parents don't have. And so right now, the onus is put entirely on the parents, and obviously the platforms have a greater sense of ability and understanding and controls there, and I think as Ryan had noted correctly, the incentives and business model to keep promoting and pushing this. Within those platforms, though, there's a real fight now as people realize that somebody's going to have to take the blame. And so you see Meta come out with a fairly cynical proposal that says, we're fine. It's actually Apple and Google and the smartphone manufacturers that need to take care of this problem for everyone, not us, because, that's the physical device. And you see others, arguing different aspects of it. It is very clear that platforms need to do more, and that, as Ryan said, it will need a business model legislation will hold them to account. I think the challenge here is that the tools we have that would be most effective, particularly age verification, are a very difficult technology to implement absent kind of a government mandate that kind of puts a greater risk when it comes there. So that kind of biggest tool makes it hard, but everything else around that margins is stuff that really companies are edging towards, and right now trying to push onto some other companies so that they don't have to take the responsibility for it. But ultimately, I think as you see through the passion through the senators and the parents here, it's going to fall on all of them. And I think it's clear that it won't happen on their own. And so I think what you're seeing is that while Congress might not take action, we've seen pretty robust action starting to be taken from the states. California's age-appropriate design code, the Utah bill. These are facing really big court challenges, and it's not clear they'll survive, but it is just building this patchwork of momentum that eventually, if Congress doesn't continue to act, we'll end up with some amalgam of protections that vary across states in the same way that we have protections that vary from the United States to the EU, often with the United States having less protections.
And Ryan, I can't speak to the constitutionality of these or how they might actually make their way through the courts, but two seemingly simple proposals are age verification and parental approval. How far could just those things go toward at least starting to correct the problem?
I think age verification provides a really important break and is probably the most workable of those options. That comes with some downsides because then you're starting to put people's IDs into big databases. Some people do go online to assume a different identity. If you're a young gay or trans kid or someone who's thinking about transitioning, maybe you don't want the world to know who you are as you express yourself. So it's not a black and white situation here. But what I would say is that when we think about our planes, our cars, our food, we don't regulate it by just seeing what works, and then when a plane falls out of the sky, we figure it out later. We have systems to check in advance what does work, sort of what is practical. We find the flaws before the thing gets released into the world, and tech has to move a little bit more in that direction as well. It can't just move fast, break things, and then say sorry in Congress like it has for all of these years.
Amy Klobuchar, who's been involved in this issue a very long time, said, you know, you have one plane, the door blows out, no one dies, thank God, but you ground all the planes. We see and have verification of children whose deaths are tied to social media sites, and we do nothing. Let's see if anything comes out of this. Thank you both very much, Adam Connor and Ryan Heath, for being with us. We appreciate it. In 60 seconds, new details on how, where, and when the U.S. could respond to the strike that killed American troops, and how part of it could be online.
Let's go this way. Lots of severe problems. I feel so sorry for those military families and the military people that took on a blow like that shouldn't have had to have. We should have had advance warnings in place to have never, ever allowed for a drone to gotten that close. Okay, let's back up just for 1 second.
Appreciate it.
Back up a little more. Keep going. Right there.
I think that there are harms that we need to
back up. Right there.
I want to point you to one specific exchange between one of the panelists and the Meta CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, where Zuckerberg pushed back on this idea that the social media platforms themselves are inherently dangerous. Take a listen.
If you're not willing to acknowledge that it's a dangerous place for children, the internet is a dangerous place for children, not just your platform, isn't it? Isn't the internet a dangerous place for children?
I think it can be. Yeah, there's both great things that people can do, and there are harms that we need to work through.
Yeah, it's a dangerous place for children. There are families here who have lost their children. There are families across the country whose children have engaged in self-harm, who have experienced low self-esteem, who have been sold deadly pills on the internet. The internet's a dangerous place for children, and your platforms are dangerous places for children. Do you agree?
I think that there are harms that we need to work to mitigate.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to, I think overall...
Why not? Why not just acknowledge it? Why do we have to do the very careful...
I disagree with the characterization.
Which character? That the internet's a dangerous place for children?
I think you're trying to characterize our products as inherently dangerous.
And there were several examples of that where these tech CEOs were really put on the hot seat and forced to answer uncomfortable questions about their role as it relates to this problem. The bigger question, the bigger question, Chris, is whether or not there is going to be any sort of real tangible legislative fix to all of these problems. You know, there are a number of bills that have been bottled up either in committee or yet to get a vote on the full floor of the House or the Senate because of a number of technical issues related to how they're making their way through Congress. And Congress is often slow to deal with these problems as it relates to tech. And sometimes by the time they pass a law, the technology has already progressed beyond the point where the legislation can even address the problem at hand. So obviously a lot of anger, a lot of distrust, and a lot of frustration by these members of Congress. The question is, what are they going to do about it here in the coming weeks?
Yeah, will there be a lot of action? And it is Christine, actually, so I'll answer to either. Thank
So
you.
we're all good. We're all good.
Ryan
Thank
Nobles, appreciate it. Well, a secretive hearing today over classified Mar-a-Lago materials, what we know about the new evidence presented by the DOJ, and how it could affect the case against the former president. We're back in 60 seconds.
I think if anything, I mean, there is good benefits to AI, the internet. If you're an adult and you can pick and choose towards which avenue you want to go in and what you want to look up and what you don't want to look up. But what people didn't realize whenever this was being distributed to the adults is that it didn't have no limitations on it only going to the adults, but going to children too as well. Children that has undeveloped minds, children that can be influenced and persuaded so easily, one way or the other, that we have allowed for this to come into our lives without it being governed properly. It would be the same thing if somebody said, okay, little Johnny, or okay, Sally, go ahead. Here's the keys to the automobile. Get out there and go. Get out there and go. Do you have any idea how chaotic it would be on the road? It's already chaotic, but it would be chaoticer if that was happening. I call the internet the cheap seats. You can go to places that you never could go before. You know, back whenever I was growing up, it was a magazine that come out every month that had world views that basically let you see what was going on the other side of the world that wasn't happening right here in your own doorstep, towards understanding how other people was dealing with problems and how other people was living and not living. Matter of fact, there were several magazines out there that was doing that at that time, in the 60s and the 70s and in the early 80s. But now you can brush all that stuff off towards basically even Homes and Garden. Probably ain't got near the marketing that they used to have back years ago whenever they was putting out material like that. Which, like I said, it does have benefits. In one way, we're saving the trees. And that's only one thing that it is having benefits towards. But then there's so many other disbenefits, like a Wild Wild West show, that we're just now realizing the dangers, not just in children, but in the adults, towards people being able to do things, weaponize it, and do things that you couldn't do before the internet ever come out as far as artificial intelligence.
Take us through the key takeaways.
We're going to pretty well end this right here pertaining to all this. I hate it that it has taken this long before people has finally awakened to these problems. That it's going to be either a asset or a liability in not just what's going on today, but what's going on 10 years from now, what's going on 15, 20 years from now. Everything we do today affects our lives on down the road, or it affects somebody's life on down the road, especially if you're out in the eyes of the general public domain. Everything that's out there on a marketing type scale, and you do have to look at churches in a business type sector, that even though it's supposed to be charity, non-profitable, you have to look at it in the format towards it being marketing, the same way in commercials or anything else, that these things are out there in public domain. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from here. I want to keep in mind those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice and those that will have to pay the ultimate sacrifice, sadly and regrettably, in the future, pertaining to our men and women in uniform and our first responders. God bless and shalom.